All right, so we go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar on climate transition plans, new expectations. This is the last in our webinar series, SBTi Net Zero Consultation, what businesses need to know now. With SBTi reinforcing the role of climate transition plans in its latest draft, companies will need to go beyond setting targets and demonstrate credible, actionable strategies to reach net zero. Today, in this 30-minute session, we are going to break down the key elements of the draft guidance, explain how SBTi applies it, and climate transition plans, what they are, what has changed under the new draft guidance, and how to align yours with regional regulations. Quick housekeeping before we get into the good stuff. You are all muted and will be for the duration of the session. Please do post any questions in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer some of these during the Q&A session at the tail end of the presentation. If we run out of time, of course, we will answer all questions via email. And just a final reminder, the session will be recorded and sent to all who registered. Joining me today on the webinar, we have Mani Gupta, who is an Associate Director, as well as Harman Gill, one of our Senior Managing Consultants within Climate Advisory. I'm David Bachner, and I am the Regional Director of Sales for North America. So let's dive into the agenda and run through what we are focusing on over the next 30 minutes or so. Today, our focus is on climate transition plans, a crucial topic for companies navigating new sustainability expectations and regulations. We'll begin by highlighting key changes in the new draft of the Corporate Net Zero Standard V2, including how it aligns with emerging global standards. Then we'll move on to explore how these evolving frameworks align with regulatory requirements, especially in regions like Australia. And then from there, we'll dive into the elements of building a credible climate transition plan, how to move beyond ambition to action. And then finally, we'll cover practical steps to help you get started or refine your approach. So on that note, I'm going to pass the mic over to Harman.
Thanks, David. Pleasure to be here, everyone. Let's start by grounding ourselves in what a climate transition plan actually is. At its core, a climate transition plan sets out how your business will transform to accelerate the transition towards a net zero world. It plays two key roles. Externally, it allows investors, insurers, regulators, and society to assess the integrity of your climate ambitions. It demonstrates that your goals are not just aspirational, they're credible and actionable. Internally, it defines how you operationalize and finance your climate strategy and the steps you take towards that, while maintaining accountability and tracking progress. You can think of your net zero ambition as your guiding star, your long-term aspiration. This shapes your decisions, investments across the business. It's directional, but not prescriptive. And it signals your environmental responsibility to internal and external stakeholders. But ambition alone isn't enough. That's where climate transition plans come in. They're your roadmap, the link between your vision and your action, with clear milestones, enablers, and accountability. Now, on the next slide, we'll look at why climate transition plans are no longer a nice to have. So why do you need a climate transition plan? We've reached a turning point. What was once a nice to have has now become an expectation from both regulators and investors. Climate transition plans have shifted from being optional to mandatory, especially under evolving global frameworks like the SBTi, CSRD, and ISSB. Now, the shift isn't just about checking a compliance box. These regulations are designed to increase transparency, accountability, and comparability. But they're also meant to do a little bit more than that. They're here to drive real business transformation, to push companies to embed sustainability across their core business operations, as well as the entire value chain. So while yes, there is a compliance element to it, a well-constructed transition plan is a strategic asset, one that can unlock long-term value by preparing your business to thrive in a net zero economy. And it has real financial implications, which we'll see in a few moments. Investors are looking for future-ready companies, An incredible transition plan strengthens your investment case for that and demonstrates that your business is built for the future while still aligning yourself with disclosure expectations. Now, we'll look at, on the next slide, we'll look at the key drivers behind this shift. Let's start by talking about a leading global framework, SBTi, or Science-Based Targets Initiative. Now, the Science-Based Target Initiative helps companies set science-aligned climate targets, as the name suggests, to stay within the 1.5 degree trajectory. As many of you might be aware, as part of its evolution from version 1.0, SBTi is currently revising its corporate net zero standard, with the draft 2.0 now open for public consultation. Now, this update, the update to the standard aims to be more practical, robust, and more aligned with expectations of stakeholders, including regulators and investors. Now, before we dive into the specifics in the next couple of slides, let's take a second to look at the timelines for 2.0. The final version of 2.0 is expected to be published in 2026, so right around the corner. It'll go into effect in 2027. There's a transition period in place for companies that have already approved their near-term targets, and they can continue to use them until 2030 or their end date, whichever comes first. Now, from 2030 onwards, all newer updated targets must comply with version 2.0. Now, again, this marks a significant shift and sets the stage for stronger expectations, which we'll explore in the next slide. Now, let's begin by focusing on the climate transition plan in the draft 2.0 of this SBTi standard. One of the most important updates in the climate transition, is the climate transition plan becoming mandatory. In version 1.0, companies were encouraged to develop transition plans, but it was not a formal requirement. Now in version 2.0, which is in draft, that's changing. Companies setting or updating net zero targets will be required to submit a structured and well-defined transition plan. Now, CTP, or a climate transition plan, will need to demonstrate how the company intends to deliver on those targets. This includes governance, strategy, capital allocation, operations, and accountability mechanisms, among other things. This is a clear signal from SBTi that ambition alone is no longer enough. What matters is there's a credible and clear pathway to delivering these targets. In short, companies won't just be judged on where they're going, but on whether they can show how they're getting there. Now, let's unpack some of the other notable changes in V2. Now, there's a lot to go over, but we'll share some of the key highlights here of changes in V2 of the SBTi standard. First, universality. Under version 2.0, climate transition plans will become mandatory, as mentioned earlier, for all companies, regardless of size and sector. Now, that's a major shift, closing a key gap from the previous version of the standard. Second, timing. Companies will need to publish their transition plan within 12 months of the target approval. Now, this ensures early transparency and sets the tone for accountability from the onset. Next, structure and scope. These plans must go beyond the high-level ambition. The draft outlines specific elements that must be included, like governance, strategy, financing, stakeholder engagement, key metrics. In short, your plan must be a fully fledged operational strategy and not just a narrative. In addition, accountability. The annual reporting is required, not only on emissions, but on your implementation indicators. That includes tracking things like progress on reduction initiatives or CapEx alignment with climate goals. And lastly, enabling levers. This is a new and important addition. Companies must now disclose the tools and mechanisms they'll use to meet their targets, whether that's R&D investment, policy advocacy, supplier engagement, or internal decisions. Altogether, this evolution positions the climate transition plan as a core driver of your corporate decarbonization strategy. Now, it's worth repeating, this is not just a box-ticking disclosure exercise. It's a tool for measurable operational change, and it's going to be a defining feature of how companies are evaluated going forward. On the next slide, let's have a look at what investors are saying. There we go. So this year, we released our 2025 net zero report with a special focus on financial institutions. Why? The reason's simple. Financial institutions have the power to lead markets and influence global climate action at scale. According to the findings referenced in South Pole's 2025 net zero report, up to 45% of financial institutions, so nearly half, may already be requiring companies in their portfolios to disclose a climate transition plan. This reinforces the idea that climate transition plans are not just encouraged, they're starting to become a baseline requirement for access to capital. And even beyond that, in the same report, 83% of global financial institutions said that a company with a credible climate transition plan is more attractive to finance. So the message is clear. Investors want more than just a long-term climate target. They want to see how you're going to achieve it through structured, transparent, and finance-integrated plans. A climate transition plan is no longer just about sustainability. It's a tool for future-proofing your investment case and strengthening your financial credibility as we move towards a net zero economy in a world. And if you're curious to learn more of the findings, we invite you to download the full report from our website after this session. Now I'll hand it back over to David.
Thanks, Harman. Just wanted to quickly remind everyone out there to please keep the questions coming, and at the end, we'll do our best to circle back and answer as many of them as we can. On that note, I'm going to pass the baton over to Himani.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to join everyone for the webinar today. And thanks, Herman, for setting the stage. In the next section of the webinar, we'll dive deeper into what this process of building a climate transition plan looks like for most companies. And so let's begin with what we believe is the cornerstone of any climate transition effort. It's credibility, right? So across industries, we are seeing the same shift. Climate commitments are under the microscope. Stakeholders are asking, can you deliver on it? And that's where credibility comes in. From our experience advising clients in hard to abate sectors, to tech, to finance, a credible climate transition plan rests on three interlocking pillars: finance, operations, and governance. So, of course, there are other aspects to be considered, like communications and culture and people who should be involved, but these are the foundation of any plan. And let's start with finance. So, we often hear companies say, we have the targets, but our budgets doesn't reflect them. This is where financial planning is essential, and integrating climate into financial planning is the key. This includes your capex decisions, integrating climate risks into financial models, using scenario analysis to test resilience, using tools like internal carbon pricing, exploring funding mechanisms such as green bonds, etc. All of this is part of sort of integrating climate into financial planning. And if the financials don't reflect the transition, we know that the strategy won't get traction. And that's why we say it's one of the core pillars of building a credible climate transition plan. And then there is operations, where the rubber meets the road. This is where companies tackle emission hotspots, begin their decarbonizing their operations and value chains. And as we all know, it's not just about scope 1 and 2. For most companies, scope 3 is where their biggest challenge lies. So identifying those hotspots and building different decarbonization pathways, whether it is through energy efficiency, renewable energy integration, process redesign, product redesign, logistics, engaging your suppliers or your customers. All of those can be part of your decarbonization strategy. And of course, businesses must identify and implement strategies that are commercially viable and scalable. That's of course the very important. Finally, governance. I think the role of leadership cannot be overstated. A transition plan must be owned at the top. That means board level oversight, integration into risk committees, aligning executive compensation with climate performance. And all of these three pillars are interconnected, as I said earlier, and they need to be addressed simultaneously. In my mind, finance enables operations. Operations need governance to drive execution, and governance ensures accountability. So all of that comes together to build a credible climate transition plan. And so now that we understand what makes a plan credible, in the next slide, let's take a step back and zoom in on to the process of building that uh, credible plan. What does it look like in practice? Um, we often guide clients through this six-step journey. And again, the narrative should not be getting overwhelmed or lost in the tick box exercise. And also, the journey is not linear by any means. It needs to be iterative. Depending on a company's maturity, you can start at any step. But typically, and of course, as I said, it's a journey. It's absolutely okay to focus on complying with mandatory compliance disclosures in the first year, with the idea of building out something more standalone and refined in year two and going forward. It's, as you can see on the slide, it starts with setting ambition. That might mean setting targets aligned with SBTi or other frameworks that are relevant for your industry, or committing to net zero by 2030. Making sure that the ambition is bold but also grounded in business reality. The second step is to align with the framework. And there is no one framework that I could tell you that universally defines what goes in a climate transition plan. SBTi's draft net zero guidance that Herman spoke about recommends aligning with UK's Transition Planning Task Force (TPT) framework, which is one of the most comprehensive one out there, um, and it is now owned by the IFRS. But the basic pillars that we've discussed remain same across different frameworks. The key is to choose one or more that aligns with your geographical footprint and stakeholder expectations. From there, we identify gaps against the pillars identified in a selected framework. That means, do you have clear accountability? Do you have a roadmap? Do our financial and operational leaders engaged? Have you completed a risk assessment? So all of those things. And once you've identified the gaps, then you would move on to identifying actions to close those gaps. This is essentially the bridge between high level goals and day to day execution. It means building a portfolio of interventions across operations, product, procurement, investments. We also recommend stress testing these actions under different climate and regulatory scenarios to make sure that your plan is as robust as possible. Engaging stakeholders, of course, your internal team, suppliers, customers, investors. Engagement isn't just about communication. It's about co-creating a plan, identifying the risks, and building credibility early. So that's super critical. And then finally, building a document that brings everything together in a comprehensive climate transition plan and aligns with your chosen framework. And tailoring the plan for external audiences. These steps are not strictly, as I said, linear, and may happen in parallel, but taken together, they create the structure and the discipline that is needed by companies to move from ambition to action. I want to highlight a case study in the next slide. It's a real world example. We recently supported a global semiconductor equipment manufacturer, a company deeply embedded in electronics supply chain. For confidentiality, we'll keep their name anonymous, but I want to share some of the details from that work with you all. They viewed climate transition beyond compliance as a driver for value creation, for enhancing their competitiveness through energy efficient product line. So we supported them through the process of establishing their base year emissions, completing climate risk scenario analysis, setting an extremely ambitious 2035 net zero goal. But what made their journey powerful was how they moved quickly from this ambition to alignment. We selected multiple credible frameworks to guide the plan: CSRD for regulatory readiness, TPT for strategic structure, CDP and TCFT to align with investor expectations. So, what this did was it gave them a robust backbone and enabled them to communicate with diverse audiences. We helped develop a decarbonization roadmap for them that outlined the actions that they could take across their operations, products, and supply chain in short, medium, and long term, in order to reach their near term and net zero target. What also stood out was their governance approach. They embedded climate accountability into their executive scorecards. They linked key ESG metrics into performance reviews that sent a powerful internal and external signal. Climate isn't optional, it's business priority, and that reflected very well in the climate section of the plan, a governance section of the plan, sorry. In this case, shows when ambition is paired with internal alignment, external frameworks, and clear execution, a climate transition plan becomes a catalyst and not just a compliance task. To close in the next slide, I want to leave everyone with maybe two key recommendations that we consistently make to our clients who are just beginning or refining their transition planning process. The first is, we always say, begin with the basics and build the foundation. This includes getting your data in order, a robust emissions baseline, reliable projections, ambitious targets, and clear performance indicators. Conduct a climate scenario analysis to understand your organization's climate risks and opportunities. It also means integrating climate into core processes that we talked about earlier, like capital allocation, procurement, risk management, product development. I often say if it's not in the budget or in the incentive structure, it's not real. So that's where we want to start. And then, secondly, engage with your stakeholders early and often. We've seen that stakeholder engagement isn't just a communication exercise, it's strategic. Suppliers may hold the key to scope 3 reductions. Consumers can influence design and demand. And internal teams, especially in finance, legal, and operations, need to co own the plan if it's going to work. So, engagement helps ensure that plan reflects the real operating context and create shared ownership. It helps build broader momentum. So as you're thinking about your next steps, whether it's updating a roadmap, preparing for disclosure, or embedding climate into investment decisions, focus on laying the groundwork and building these coalitions. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to hearing the questions that we've received, and I'll hand it back to David to guide us through the last few slides.
Thank you, Himani. Yeah, let's just jump right in here. A couple audience questions while we got time. First one I have, I am already publishing my sustainability report. How is a climate transition plan, or CTP, different? Harman, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, sure. First recognizing that sustainability teams or for folks that work in this space have to juggle a number of different things. So I can appreciate some of the confusion. So one way to think about it is a sustainability report typically gives you an overview of your ESG performance. It focuses on what you've already done. So things like emissions data, governance structures, or community initiatives, the like. Now, on the other hand, a climate transition plan is a bit different. It's forward-looking and it's strategic. It outlines how your organization plans to reach that net zero goal, and not just in principle, but in practice. And we've covered some of these in the session. It includes things such as targets and timelines for your emissions reductions to keep you accountable, and some of the bits that Himani alluded on, the strategy for transforming your operations and business model. This includes financing, financial details like capital expenditure that will support the delivery and execution, and then the governance behind it. It also has key assumptions like risks that you're relying on and future technologies and policy changes that you anticipate as part of that plan. So I guess in conclusion, your sustainability reports, here's what we've done, while your CTP is here's what we intend to, here's exactly how we'll achieve it and what we're committed to. And again, we alluded to this in the session that the transition plan is a bridge between ambition and execution. It's a plan that connects those high-level goals and targets to kind of day-to-day action and accountability. And it's worth underscoring, it's becoming essential for investors and regulators alike. So yeah, great question.
Awesome. Thank you, Harman. Himani, question for you. What role does the finance team play in climate transition planning?
Yeah, thanks for the question, David. I think that's a critical one. I covered a little bit of this when we were talking about the credible climate transition plans, and finance being one of the core pillars. But essentially, the finance team plays the foundational role in turning climate ambition into something that's operationally and financially credible. At a high level, it's responsible for translating goals into numbers, whether that's setting internal carbon price, updating capital allocation criteria, or embedding transition risks into forecast and investor communications. I think they're crucial in ensuring that the plan is not just an initiative, it's core part of the business strategy. And of course, the finance team must work closely with the sustainability teams to ensure that these investment decisions support the long-term decarbonization targets.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Just have my eye on the clock here. I know we have a few more questions. Unfortunately, don't have time to get to them live, but we will definitely take a look at them and follow up after this webinar. So thank you all again so much for joining us today. We hope this session provided valuable insights into the draft guidance and CTPs. Before we sign off, really excited to announce that we're actually going to have a bonus episode as part of this webinar series. June 17th and 18th, mark your calendar. We will be hosting a final session for the series with SBTi CEO. It's a 45-minute session. We'll include a presentation by CEO David Kennedy and a Q&A conversation with our very own South Pole CEO, Dr. Daniel Clear. Session will end with live and pre-submitted audience questions, so please make sure to submit your burning questions to be answered. Best session to join will be June 17th at 4 p.m. SGT and 6 p.m. Australia time, as both CEOs are based in the UK, so we're getting them just as their days begin. We hope you can still join us live for the exciting conversation. You will all receive a webinar from today's session along with the link to register for this bonus session in your inbox soon. So thank you all again, and have a great day.